Characters in Genshin Impact can be precisely divided into two distinct ethnic groups. Those with 4 stars next to their name, and those with 5. What'd you think I was gonna say, huh? Anyway, the one trait that unites all 4-star characters is that they're all relatively dogshit at Constellation 0 compared to 5 stars, as they lack numbers and fundamental features in their kit that were supposed to define their place in team building. Constellations are crucial for all 4 stars to unlock important features in their kit and to make them drastically more useful. Therefore, logically, it should always be that the more constellations, the better, right? Wait, right? Yeah, actually. And believe it or not, there is no counterexample of this. But what about C6 Bennett? No. This whole idea of C6 Bennett ruining him, or get this, ruining your entire account, is completely a schizo take. Whatever sliver of validity this idea may or may not have held in the past, none of it lingers today. I'd like to explain why the whole C6 Bennett is bad fiasco is utterly stupid, and why the few caveats to this conclusion that you may already be thinking of are almost certainly irrelevant. If you're interested in more analytical Genshin content like this, or very concise yet heavily informative character/team guides for your favorite units, please subscribe and watch my other videos. It helps me a great deal. Let's begin today's discussion by quickly examining what C6 Bennett even does. First and foremost, C6 Bennett grants a 15% pyro damage bonus to any character standing in his buff circle. This is actually worded incorrectly in the English text, as this buff is not just limited to melee characters. Bows, catalysts receive this buff all the same. Secondly, C6 Bennett grants a pyro infusion to all melee characters in his circle. And this part of the constellation is what ignited the infamous controversy in the first place. People assumed, and still do to this day, that this pyro infusion, which overrode physical damage and certain other infusions, was problematic as it supposedly ruined Bennett's synergy with many characters. And since Bennett was historically regarded as one of, if not the best and most universal supports in the game thanks to his big attack steroid, people were naturally afraid that activating his C6 would ruin multiple characters' optimal teams because, well, they all wanted Bennett and now they can't be played with him. What if I told you that this is not the case? It probably never was, definitely isn't now, and more importantly, almost certainly never will be in the future. Here are some reasons why you should activate C6 Bennett now, if you haven't already. Bennett is not universally desired in team building, and shouldn't be treated as such. He is a pyro character first and foremost, with terrible energy generation unless allowed a decent period of field time, which is pretty much never desirable or even possible when playing him as a support. Therefore, he is fundamentally undesirable outside of pyro resonance teams, or teams with extremely high energy generation. One popular anti-C6 Bennett argument is that it ruins physical teams. In reality, Bennett is barely even playable in physical teams, pyro infusion or not. You see, a pyro character that generates 2 particles per E-skill at most twice per rotation doesn't blend all that well with a team full of energy-starved cryo and or electro characters. Not only does Bennett struggle to get his own burst up consistently, he contributes next to nothing in filling up the gaping energy black holes known as Eula, Fremine, Razor, etc., or their teammates. Bennett in physical teams is an utterly unrecommendable mess. Which leads me to my next point. There tend to always be better, more synergistic support options than Bennett for the types of teams that his C6 supposedly ruins. Back to the physical example. It would be one thing if scuffing Bennett allowed for Eula teams to reach their ceiling, but that's not even close to being the case. Mika, Farina, plus an Electro character is not just a much superior team with fewer, crippling gameplay issues, it's also just more damage all things considered. The same could be said about slotting in Rosaria, Yelan, etc. Due to limitations in energy and element, Bennett is very far down the list of team building priority in physical or other teams with similarly scuffed energy economy. More quote-unquote specialized supports exist and will always exist in every corner of the Genshin team building canvas. Abolish the mindset of defaulting to using Bennett in every team. C6 or not, he often just sucks compared to the alternatives. We'll also discuss a little bit about C6 Bennett ruining infusions. First of all, it's worth noting that 90% of infusions in this game are not overrideable. If you play Bennett with Child, Navia, Raiden, etc., you notice that Hoyo makes a conscious effort not to make C6 Bennett ruin central elements of a character's playstyle. And in the rare occurrence that a character does have an overrideable infusion, changing that infusion never really alters anything significant. Take Ayaka and C6 Lynette, for example. neither of which necessarily want to be played with Bennett to begin with, but both technically can be. Anyhow, who actually cares what element their normal attacks are? Their skills and bursts do almost all of their damage anyway, and if anything, the 15 damage percent from C6 Bennett more than likely buffs other units on the team more than the infusion hurts Ayaka or Lynette. The only examples of overridable infusions that actually do something significant are Kating and Dori. And if you play either of them with Bennett, I just want to ask you why, and if you're doing okay. Once again, there are clearly superior supports and team archetypes to be used with such characters than to force Bennett. To this day, Hoyo has yet to release a single character who has an overridable infusion that dealt a significant portion of their damage or did something very important with said infused attacks, happens to want Bennett in their best team, and that his C6 would ruin. It just doesn't happen. The infusion either can't be overridden, doesn't matter, or more than likely, there are simply more synergistic supports for them than Bennett in their specific element and team archetype. Despite the extent to which I believe I've established that C6 Bennett really doesn't and probably never will ruin anything meaningful, it's natural that some people would still wish to maintain the just-in-case mentality, and I want to challenge that. I advocate for C6 Bennett because there are tangible benefits that it provides to characters and teams that actually appreciate and synergize well with Bennett. First of all, C6 Bennett grants a 15% pyro damage bonus, which is equal to roughly 3 to 4 substats in artifact quality for all pyro characters. This might not sound like a lot, but keep in mind, a 3 to 4 substat upgrade may take weeks, months, I don't know, maybe even years of grinding artifacts to obtain, depending on your current artifact quality. Free damage is always good. Secondly, C6 Bennett allows characters like Kazuha or Xianyun to much more consistently and ergonomically swirl pyro in many setups. For example, in this case, I can cast Bennett's E before his burst and apply pyro again with just a normal attack, allowing Xianyun to swirl pyro while letting Bennett catch his own particles, which is fantastic. Lastly, but certainly not least, C6 Bennett allows any melee character to do pyro damage, which can enable some pretty ridiculous yet powerful teams, like this awesome Kazuha Xianyun plunge vape comp. However small these upsides may seem, the fact is that activating C6 Bennett has no relevant downsides, yet concretely benefits the teams that you actually use him in. There's no point in not doing it unless you have a very specific rationale in mind. Like, I don't know, you want to play physical Varka with Bennett for lore reasons, not because Bennett has any real chance of being good in such a team. Shout out to TGS for the funny idea. So, what did we learn? Number 1. Bennett is not universally desired in team building. This is due to both energy constraints and the fact that there are always specialized supports that buff more and synergize better than him with specific team archetypes that don't focus on other pyro characters. Nearly all of the teams that C6 Bennett ruins never wanted Bennett to begin with. Number 2. Hoyo rarely releases characters with overridable infusions, and if they do, again, they're probably of an element that doesn't want to be played with Bennett. For characters that can use Bennett and have overridable infusions, what element those infused attacks are often don't matter. Number 3. C6 Bennett is a guaranteed 3 to 4 substat numerical upgrade for characters and teams that are actually synergistic with him, and enables easier, more consistent, and just better setups in such situations. The infusion also enables fascinating new playstyles for a variety of characters. The controversy around C6 Bennett is not something that deserves to be presented as a serious point of contention anymore. For the vast majority, just treat C6 Bennett like any other beneficial constellation in the game, because that's all it is. Today is Bennett's birthday, and probably the last birthday he'll ever have before you quit this beautiful yet terrible game within the next 4 years. Show your appreciation for this unlucky pyro shonen by activating his final constellation. The man has suffered enough. His soul deserves to be complete. It's time that you looked him in the eyes and said, "Happy birthday, Bennett. It's time that you finally had fire ventures with me." That was cringe. Butterfur out. See ya.